the opposition then of, let's say, the capitalist to the pre-capitalist kind of society, where the most important economic institutions, and yeah, Marx is mainly an economic determinist, so the economic institutions are what counts most here, are the way that labor is institutionalized. Yeah, and this is institutionalized through wage labor in the capitalist society, which is made possible through a legal form of private property, which exists for all kinds of commodities, but which is also transplanted to how labor is organized, namely in commodity form. So this is the most important modern institution then for him. And according to Weber, according to Marx, then this wage labor organization of society produces alienation. It is not crystal clear in Marx whether the pre-capitalist societies, right, which also faced class wars, were alienated or not. In one reading, they were not, because they did not use wage labor. In another reading, as they involved also class wars, they may have also had alienation phenomena, just not to the same degree. But yeah, modern societies are clearly, let's say, the more alienated. And this is the key distinction then also for Marx when distinguishing the old from the modern societies. So these are all ideotypical descriptions, very simplified here, obviously, in this tableau, but that highlight again the main, I think, aspects of these different theories. So how to think about this juxtaposition of old and new society, ideal types among these different thinkers. Here, our different thinkers also have very different ideas about, let's say, the transition model or the theories of transition, and also the notions of sociology meant to study this kind of transition, and even regarding the, let's say, methods or ways of writing about these differences. So to summarize briefly, we saw in Spencer's work mostly, but this influenced, I think, all of the other thinkers, evolutionary theory being applied to the study of society. Yeah, so this basic idea that a sort of chanceful random events produce mutations, which in turn get selected or not, and produce ultimately then a change in society. Marx is the thinker probably closest to the Hegelian ideas of dialectics, right? We saw that dialectics refers to a more complicated interaction between different elements, right? Contrary to classical logics, it kind of produces a synthesis of something new in society that both contradicts, preserves, but also elevates the former elements into a synthesis. Which is also something that makes it different from a pure natural science methodology. I think it was mostly in Durkheim's work that we came across this notion perhaps of legacies, yeah, so that elements in the new society inherit also elements of older societies. And while the early Durkheim might have thought that it was more of a shackle that modern societies still have, I don't know, family institutions, for instance, or other institutions based on mechanic solidarity, the later Durkheim rather thought that these remnants or legacies were in a way a kind of blessing that were even functional for modern societies to exist. In the more German thinkers on this tableau, we all noticed also a certain teleology, right? So this pattern of thought that sees history as a sequence of necessary stages with a certain goal, a telos, which could be either the enlightened spirit in Hegel, or the free communist society in Marx in the most explicit terms, but which we saw is also at least implicitly underlying some of the other theories that see, let's say, at least more complex societies as something like the ultimate goal. Yeah. And evolutionary theory was meant as an opposition to the teleological thinking, and that it abolishes, if you want, the purposefulness and puts this into the random selection of nature. But implicitly, at least when you think of notions like the survival of the fittest, there's still a little bit of the old teleological idea that history has a certain path which is towards ever stronger societies of survivors. The ideas of how sociology should work is also far from being homogeneous among these different thinkers. So we encountered this old methodological dispute among the German historical school versus the German economists in the 19th century about describing society only as a collection of singular facts ideographically versus finding, if you want, the social laws of societies nomothetically. And many of these thinkers on the tableau were fascinated by the natural sciences and were toying with the idea of a nomothetically organized social science that would reveal the law-like regularities in the social world. But we also saw that Weber, Simmel, Tönnies were all influenced also by the German historical school, which was against a pure transplantation of the natural sciences to the social world, but argued rather for making sociology a historiographic discipline. The thinkers we discussed have also different ideas about how explanations should work, with functionalism probably being most prominent by those most influenced by evolutionary theories, and causal sort of theories being most prominent, at least in the definition of sociology, by Max Weber. But yeah, also in many of the writings of Karl Marx, there are notions of causality involved. So notions like the Wechselwirkung or dialectics also suggest that, let's say, non-causal ways of explanations could be what found sociology. And we also noticed this ambiguity or even contradiction in Max Weber's definition of sociology, where he juxtaposes the causal explanation sociology should engage in and simultaneously the understanding of social phenomena of intentions, the Verstehen tradition that founded later interpretativism in sociology. In short, the entire range of options that even current day sociology had with regard to how to organize sociology and social science was already there, and this also holds for how to think about social ontology. Right, we saw the liberals like Spencer also with a clear emphasis on individual atomized kind of ontologies, and Durkheim as probably the most pronounced thinker in favor of a holist ontology that defends the idea that society is more than the sum of its parts, that there are supra-individual kind of entities that are not reducible to individuals and their beliefs and intentions alone. We also saw that some of the more German thinkers still thought about sociology and theories in terms of systems, so that nothing sort of short of a system is what sociology should be about. Let's say the more British tradition of empiricism in our thinkers is clearly more in favor of the production, in favor of the atomized production of knowledge without grand overarching kind of system-like theories. And yeah, last but not least, some of these thinkers, most of the Germans, again here, saw sociology as a historic discipline, yeah, that situates at least regularities in a certain historical setting, against the idea that sociology should describe ahistoric kind of regularities. You may have noticed yourself in the readings that the main genre of sociology was not very well established at this time. So in current day sociology, I would say that there's a clear tendency towards very standardized articles in journal publications as a dominant mode of, let's say, sociological methodology and production. Back in the day, as you may have seen, writings range from manifestos in Marx' case to statistical treatises, as many of these writers wrote for social reform think tanks, very loose essays. Like the Protestant ethic is one, for instance. But yeah, also book treaties. Think about Durkheim's suicide. Empirical articles, simmel published in the American Journal of Sociology, or grand enquête, so multi-volume kind of studies that describe, for instance, the conditions of the East Albion laborers in the case of Max Weber. So, in short, I would say the classical thinkers laid out the entire panopticon of different theoretical choices that 20th century thinkers then were also able to choose from. I think with this, we make the transition now also to North American sociology.